on reflection, I've thought about this, which is many years after the murders, but some things are still very clear in my mind. And one is regarding Olive Smelt. Now, Olive was, as far as we knew, was the second victim of Peter Sutcliffe, but she actually survived. She was attacked in August 1975. I hadn't been on the inquiry very long, but George Oldfield approached me and told me to go and see Olive Smelt because she had been complaining that she had been described as a prostitute, not only by the press but by a certain senior police officer. She objected to this, and rightly so, because she wasn't, and I was told to pacify her and to try and help. She was extremely displeased, and I told her that this was not the police view, that it was newspaper talk and they had got it wrong. She seemed to accept this, but whilst I was there I took the opportunity of asking her. I did actually meet her at her home with her husband. He was very quiet, but Olive was quite a feisty character. And anyway, I took the opportunity to ask her about the incident, and I do remember very clearly what she said. She said that her attacker had a local accent, and this was brought about later when you talk about the voice on the tape known as Wearside Jack. Olive was convinced, and many others on this inquiry, myself included, were also convinced that the voice on the tape was wrong, and that the murder, the later murders, were committed by a Yorkshireman. Following on from this, I later remember Marilyn Moore, who was a prostitute, and she was interviewed. She also survived the Ripper inquiry, the Ripper attack, and at the time she said that the man who attacked her was a local man, called himself Dave, and she gave a superb description of him. Super description, and later she made a photo of it at the time. And in fact, a statement was taken from her, and it was of such interest that a second officer went to a couple of days later to make a more detailed description, and it was obviously thought by we detectives on the ground that there was something in it. But again, we were told that, look, Marilyn Moore, she's a liar. She tells lies. Well, she may have done. If she was out soliciting for prostitution and being questioned, she may have told a lie that she wasn't. But she certainly isn't going to tell a lie about a man who just tried to kill her, who just tried to murder her. And of course, we all thought, or a lot of us thought, that when they pooh-poohed it, said, look, she must be wrong, she's wrong, it's not. And everybody was swallowing this business about this voice on the tape, who turned out to be the hoaxer, John Humble. I remarked on this. I remember my wife reminded me when I came home from work. As a result, I later went back into the murder incident room in Leeds, and I purposely got copies of her statements, which I have shown on the camera, so you would see them on the film. And she was adamant, Marilyn Moore was adamant, that the man who attacked her was a Yorkshire man who gave his name as Dave, and her description, her photo fitting was exact. It was an exact description of him. I have been asked what I thought, or what I think about the Yorkshire Ripper. I never met him, of course, but I did see the results of what he did to some of his victims, and I can only describe him as evil. Unfortunately, there are people in society who, I would say that, in my view, because what they do, they give up their right to be treated as human beings. I was on the enquiry from early 1976 to his arrest in January 1981. I had been involved in a few murder inquiries before that, and many murder inquiries after this, but this was the most demanding. Working on the Yorkshire Ripper murder inquiries certainly took its toll of family life. Many officers were, because of what they had to do and what they saw, it was extremely demanding, and Peter Sutcliffe was quite rightly in prison and should never ever be released. The man is a monster. Well, when I decided to assist in the making of this film about the Yorkshire Ripper, because details of these murders had been in the public domain, I believe that the public have a right to know exactly what happened, and particularly with regard to his arrest. I've already explained in earlier films about this arrest, and I think some credit should go to the late Jack Rigg, the sergeant from Dewsbury, who in a small way played a major part in the investigation. And from the outset, I contacted Andy Laptew, an outstanding police officer, who, to be quite honest, I feel sorry for, because at the time there were many officers on the inquiry, and Andy and his late colleague, a detective by the name of Graham Greenwood, had actually interviewed Peter Sutcliffe at great length, and they thought that he should have been investigated further, and Andy put in a report to the senior officers, and he was not ridiculed, but he was pushed back quite cruelly, I think, and this has affected Andy over the years, making him somewhat depressed. You know, he always asks himself the question, should I have done more? Could I have done more? And I don't think he could have done any more than what he did, but certainly an outstanding officer, and I have a great lot of respect for Andy and what he did. Of course, Peter Sutcliffe was alibied by both his father John and his wife Sonia, who, to be quite honest, were not independent witnesses, so this should not have been taken as it was. I believe it came out later that I know that Peter Sutcliffe married his wife Sonia in 1974, and I think just prior to the marriage she had been examined, because it was thought that she was suffering from schizophrenia. Now, whether this is exactly right, I don't know, but I know that she was. It was thought that she did have schizophrenia, but as I say, I don't know. After Andy got the ticking off by the officers about his interview with Peter Sutcliffe, I thought that was very, very wrong, very cruel, and because at the time a lot of officers actually on the inquiry were dubious about what the senior officers thought. Catastrophic decisions were made, and comments were made at the time, the old adage about the First World War, you know, where we're being led by donkeys. It's perhaps a bit harsh, but I can understand why, because serious mistakes were made, serious errors, as a result of which several people unnecessarily died.